Hey, welcome to Wilosophy vlog and video log. This is a series about entrepreneurship, startups, leadership, and whatever we want to talk about in China. And today, I'm Will, just in case you don't know who I am, and I've got an umbrella falling down on me. We're in Fillmore, where we started our first vlog. It's not the evening, it's just about to rain, and it's seasonal weather in Guangzhou. It's dragging a boat. But I have with me Joel Gallo from the US. I met Joe at an entrepreneur's event not too long ago. Super interesting guy. But I'll hand you over to Joe for a quick introduction. Joe, thank you for your time.
My pleasure, Will. Great to be here.
It is quite early in the morning.
I know, it looks like it's nighttime.
But it looks like it's nighttime. But yeah, I'll hand over to you while I sip my Fillmore coffee.
Sure, absolutely. So thanks again, Will. So my name is Joel Gallo. I'm from the United States, from New York, and I'm an executive that works in finance. I've been working in the global financial sector for 25 years.
Wow.
And so I'm actually a co-founder and principal at GLS Group, which is a management consultancy.
GLS standing for?
Gallo, Luck, and Swanson. So it's my two other partners that work in the United States.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're very creative. It's just, the first letter of the last name. So that's how we created GLS.
So not SLG or LGS or LFG?
No, just GLS, exactly.
Okay, cool.
And so it's a management consultancy that we started, and so I'm actually in the process of expanding that here in China. And I'm also on the board of directors for a Chinese industrial company that will IPO on NASDAQ by the summer. So I'm advising them with the whole IPO listing. And prior to that, I spent a long time working at Deloitte, EY, PwC, Deutsche Bank Asset Management. So, a very long career in finance. And, I'm lucky that at this point, because of my years in finance, I've advised more than 75 investment banks, hedge funds, private equity firms around the world. At least 75,
Are there 75 investment banks? I mean, I should know it.
I think if you count all the asset managers and all that too,
and small family
so many
offices.
of them.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we can touch upon I mean, we may not be allowed to talk about the IPO, but it'd be interesting to talk about what you advised them on, because that's, in 2017 to 2019 now, there's quite a lot of Chinese firms listing over in the US, especially on NASDAQ.
Yes.
Okay, so what brought you to China, Joe?
Yeah, so absolutely. So, the reason I'm here is, I would say, personal and professional reasons. For a personal side, as a kid, I was always fascinated by China. I remember my grandfather telling me stories of Marco Polo and his travels in China, Asia. Very classic, right? As a kid, you hear that. But also when, I think your elders talk to you about certain things and you don't understand, there was always a reference to China and the Chinese language. What's the matter with you? Don't you understand what I'm saying?
Chinese proverbs.
That too, very famous. And so, as a kid, I was wondering, well, what is this China? What is Chinese? And obviously, as you grow up, you learn about it and the importance in history. And, fast forward to 15 years ago, 2004, I was working at Deloitte, came to China my first trip, and I fell in love with the place. It was a fascinating place, and I always said to myself...
Sorry, where in China?
It was in Hong Kong and Guangdong.
Okay.
And I always said to myself, if I ever have the opportunity to come back, I would definitely take it and come back.
Okay, so that was 2004.
Yeah, 15 years ago.
How long did it take you 15 years to come back, or did you come back in between that time?
Oh, I've come back many times since then, and each time I've seen so many different changes in China. It's great, and certain parts of it just looks like a different country. And even in the span of a couple of years. And one of the areas that I've always been very interested in is obviously the finance sector, which is experiencing a lot of different changes. So that is why I'm there.
Okay. So GLS started how long ago? So how long has that been around?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
6 years in the US, and then is LNS in China, or is it just G that's in China right now?
Just G that's in China right now. LNS are still back in the United States.
Okay. So how does that work? You kind of look for clients as a management consultancy firm. You look for clients that need consulting, and so you're boots on the ground, and they kind of support you. How does it work there?
Yeah. So since I am the one that's here, leveraging my networks, different aspects of the networks. As you know, networking is key to everything that we do in life. Especially as an entrepreneur, as you're trying to establish your presence. And so I just try to leverage my network, whether it's a school network, friends that I know, friends of friends, different aspects of my network, to try to see if there are organizations that could use somebody with my experience, or at minimum find a conversation with me interesting. And so I try to leverage any networks that I have as much as possible.
Okay. So I remember we once talked about this not too long ago about the service industry and the finance industry in China obviously growing. Singapore taking Hong Kong's mantle for probably a year and a bit. But Shanghai probably growing. Are you seeing more business, your type of business in terms of management consulting in Shanghai and Beijing more than in the South China region?
Yeah, I still think that the hub of financial services in China is, at least on the mainland, is certainly Shanghai.
Yeah.
But what's certainly interesting here, what's happening in this part of China, in the southern part of China, is that because the government is trying to turn the whole South Bay Area, what they're calling it the Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and many other cities, into a major hub of economic and technological innovation and transformation, there's a lot of resources that are coming in here. The government built that 55-kilometer bridge uniting, Hong Kong, Macau, and Zhuhai.
Yes.
Then there's the high-speed train between Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong. It makes travel between the cities easier, and so there's a lot of attention being focused on here, a lot of technology innovation, and with that comes financial services as well. And that's part of the reason why I'm here, because you have a Silicon Valley in Shenzhen and a World Financial Center in Hong Kong right next door.
Okay. So in terms of business, what type of businesses do you think would be your market because of the Greater Bay Area?
Yeah, I think because of that innovation that's happening here in Shenzhen, there are many different startups that are happening in what I would call the blockchain and cryptocurrency space, as an example.
I was part of that.
Yeah, as an example. So it's interesting that there are thousands of blockchain cryptocurrency exchanges around the world, and even though technically trading in Bitcoin and other cryptos is illegal, many of these exchanges are Chinese owned. Right? They're Chinese based. They'll just incorporate somewhere else in the Philippines, Singapore, elsewhere. But a lot of that innovation is happening here, and so many of these startups, not surprising, like startups in any other phase of the technological boom that we had in previous generations, they're very nimble, they're very quick, but they need to mature very fast, and so they need some expertise in how to go through that maturation process, how to deal with investors, how to craft a better marketing strategy, branding, finance, and certainly corporate structure. And so, I think there's a lot of opportunity for individuals that are able to bring in some of that expertise here and lend that to some of these startups. Just as an example.
I mean, I know that firsthand. I started a cryptocurrency exchange in 2017, and the people that I was involved with, that we hired, they didn't really know what they were doing. And I think if we had Joel at the time, we would probably be able to implement much quicker. So we were incorporated and licensed in Hong Kong and the Philippines. But in terms of just that point about needing rigor around risk, regulatory, corporate governance, I'm seeing a lot of that is needed, especially if there's this massive boom. How are you approaching that, Joe? I mean, you say you use your networks. How are you approaching these particular individuals or companies or corporates to say, hey, I can do this? Do you have a brochure that you throw out, or do you redirect to a website, or do you have your official WeChat account?
Yeah.
How would people get in touch with Joe?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I certainly have a WeChat account. I think you would agree. If you don't have WeChat in China, you cannot live.
Yeah.
You need it for everything, right? But certainly WeChat is a great way to network. I try to leverage a lot of my networks. So, for example, I'm an alumni of Columbia University.
Yes.
And I'm very fortunate that at Columbia, there's many Chinese students. There's a huge Chinese student body in all different schools at Columbia. And I've been able to meet many of them over the years. And so as they started coming back, what they call the hype wave, the sea turtles that come back.
The returning sea turtles, yes.
Yes, from the U.S. to China. They're here, right? They're establishing their own enterprises. They're going to work at asset management banks. And it's important to maintain those relationships. And so I think, people naturally like to work with people that they know, that they trust, they respect. And if you're able to establish a friendship from school over the years, you maintain those bonds.
Can I ask a cheeky question? You don't have to answer. Was that a ploy, or was that a strategy to say, you know what, I'm going to get in with the sea turtles because one day I'm going to go to China and they're going to be part of my massive network? Was that in the grand scheme of things, or was it just a natural phenomenon?
I wish I was smart enough to craft a big master plan like that. No, it just happened to be that I wanted to go back to school. I missed being in academia. It's been about 10 years since my previous master's, and so I had that itch, that hunger to go back to school.
Okay.
And lo and behold, I realized, wow, the student demographic is completely different than what it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just naturally befriended, a lot of the other students. There were so many exchange students coming from other parts of the world.
Okay.
And just as a natural progression, it expanded there. I started coming to China more for work, and then one thing led to another. And of course, you just maintain. It's really just about maintaining in touch with your buddies. And then trying to see how you can
You might want to speak louder.
Oh yeah,
the
sure.
film was a really busy
Yeah.
coffee shop. It's like a co-work space.
Yeah.
And then, if you watch the first episode, they've got communal tables and stuff. So, and it's raining and the coffee is going. So hopefully, if you can't hear us, well, I don't know what we're doing.
And it is daytime, so it's not nighttime.
No, the sun's coming back out again, as you can see.
So it is going to be pretty loud.
I do want to touch on your Columbia University stuff, which is really interesting. But let's touch on the sea turtles and the returnees. So, lots of people in China want to go to the US because of the American dream. China has the China dream now. Are you seeing a lot more sea turtles coming back, and has the attitude changed when they're over there? Is something you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think whereas maybe 10, 20 years ago, a lot of Chinese students went to the United States to study.
Yeah.
Probably a good majority of them wanted to stay there if possible, obviously given visa restrictions and otherwise.
Yeah.
But I would say over the last couple of years, more and more students are going back because of the tremendous opportunity in China, all the wealth generation, all the entrepreneurship, just so much economic activity. They're realizing, you know what, there is better opportunity for me going back in China. Yeah. And of course, if you have not so friendly immigration policies, I think you're naturally going to have people coming back. And so, yeah. For all those reasons, I would say.
So there's lots of government support around innovation now. So what I'm seeing personally is, yes, lots of people coming back to China. I don't think they have the right skill sets to start up. So management consulting or business consulting, I think is a niche market. But also, just come back to your Columbia days, and I know that you spend a lot of time when you're back in the States teaching people how to interview, how to network. We might have to speak now, so it's really coming down now. Probably get closer to the camera.
Yeah. It might start raining a bit on us. That's okay.
Yeah. But in terms of helping at Columbia University, are you starting to look at there's a need for interview training, networking, communication in China now?
Sure. Absolutely. I think a lot of the students realize this, and even though many do want to come back to the United States, after people graduate, they are able to stay 1 to 3 years on their visas for OPT.
What's OPT?
So I forget what it stands for, but it allows them to work in the United States for an extra 1 or 2 or 3 years, depending upon what major they had. So a lot of them want to maximize that, even if they do want to come back to China. And so they obviously want to stay in America because they want to gain some of those hardcore technical and business skills. But outside of that, to your point, they definitely want to learn some more of the soft skills. And I think, a lot of them, one of the pieces of advice I always share with them is work on those soft skills, those interview skills. At the end of the day, it's just about meeting people, talking with people, feeling comfortable around people. And you bring that, I think you'll be able to differentiate yourself or come back to China with the mind of it.
Absolutely. I know it's raining really hard. I'm just worried about the sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of swing the camera around, and we'll stand at the coffee table.
Sure.
And then, whoa, let's see how this goes. I think we can stay out here, Joe.
Okay.
I think this is good. Look, we just turn around and
absolutely, because it started to rain on us. So
you can see how bad it was. Right, but I probably won't edit that. I think this is part and parcel of living in Guangzhou. Oh, bring it! Whoa, here we go! Wow.
Well, I just started turning on the air conditioning this week because last month it was actually like 50 degrees, which is about 15 degrees Celsius, 13 degrees, and now we're in summertime.
Okay. It's dragon boat season, so this is what they call the dragon tears, etc. So we try to finish this as much as possible. If not, we'll edit it. But coming back to the tips.
Yes.
I'm thinking about helping returning students to increase their communication interview skills. Is that something you'd be interested in? Is there something you'd want to extend from Columbia to China?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I always try to do when I was at school is to try to share some of my experience. And a lot of people would ask me, can you explain investment banking and asset management, wealth management? And I think it's very useful, but since a lot of these students want to find jobs, I always tell them at the end of the day, the X factor for me are the soft skills.
Yeah.
Because when you interview a lot of people, You see all these CVs. Everybody looks the same on paper. They went to a great school, very high GPAs. But if you can connect with someone during the interview, establish a good rapport, feel comfortable, confident, articulate your points well, which not everybody can do at that age, I think you stand out from the pack. So that's something that I'm always very interested in helping my Colombian friends or other young executives that are starting out their career and try to polish that.
Okay, so guys, you heard it here first. Joe's going to start giving out not lectures, I guess, workshops. Workshops. Okay, so maybe we can start doing heritage film work. I know that in the evenings they can do that for free. So, okay, in terms of the IPO and the advising, what are your views on the encroachment of Chinese companies into the Nasdaq and the Fortune 500? There's been a massive increase in that. Why do you think that is? And when do you think that would stop? Is there going to be a decline of that at some point in the future?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, I think a lot of, there's always been interest in Chinese companies IPOing in the United States. You certainly have two well-developed markets in the mainland, in Shenzhen and Shanghai Stock Exchange. Hong Kong is always another option. But a lot of the times the requirements are a little bit easier to list on NASDAQ. New York Stock Exchange is always a little bit harder. And so companies in China will look to IPO on NASDAQ because the requirements may be a little bit easier. And there's also that prestige.
The bar's lower, is it?
The bar could be a little bit lower.
So for our viewers, what do you mean the bar's lower?
Well, there's certain liquidity, corporate governance, financial performance standards. It could also be quicker to list on NASDAQ than in some of the domestic exchanges. And there's also the prestige of just listing your company in the United States, right?
So NASDAQ is predominantly looking at tech companies. So if you're not a tech company, you can't list on NASDAQ. So is there like a back door into that?
So it's very tech heavy, but you don't necessarily have to be a tech company to list on NASDAQ. They have 3 different markets within NASDAQ, depending upon how big you are, your financial performance, that you could actually list. But you would be part of the consolidated NASDAQ market.
Okay. So in terms of your consultancy, you're consulting for risk, is that correct, and governance?
Yes, so for this particular one, looking at some of the liquidity requirements, some of the risks, some of the corporate governance, I'm actually also head of the audit committee, and so I have to look at interacting with the external auditors because you do need externally audited financials in order to list on NASDAQ. And no audit opinion is ever clean. There are always certain issues that need to come up, and those need to be cleaned up. You need to speak to management, make sure that those are being remediated. This is part of the process.
Guys, is this... Again, it's quite a sensitive question. You don't have to answer me, and you don't have to speak about this particular company. But auditing is not one of those things that is frowned upon in China because there's so much media coverage about companies being corrupt and stuff. So having someone come in and kick a tires like you is great. But is there kind of skepticism around what you do because they say, oh well, Joe's auditor, but it's a Chinese company, so it's probably going to be pants anyway.
Yeah, no. So that's now it's coming down in waves. It's like we're at the ocean. But so that's always something I think a little bit of a perception and reputation, and that's what we looked at. But I think part of the reason that these Chinese companies that are IPOing in the U.S. they will hire typically U.S. auditors. It's almost always U.S. auditors because they have to be recognized by the accountancy boards in the U.S. And so that gives us a certain level of legitimacy that their books are legitimate. Okay,
cool. So that's why LNS are in the U.S. and you're here.
That's part of the reason, definitely.
So it sounds like quite a good business model, but in 2019 and 2020, what's coming up for GLS, what's coming up for Joe?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, definitely keep expanding into the whole cryptocurrency exchange place, the whole industry. There's so many of them that, my piece of advice to them is, listen guys, I hate to be the doomsayer, but come the next financial recession, many of these firms are going to go under, and so you have to, because I've seen it happen before in different technology waves, booms and busts, right?
Yes.
And so you have to find your way to differentiate yourself from everybody else and be one of those few surviving, right? You want to be the last man standing.
Okay.
So I'm working with a couple of them and try to help them with their strategy, corporate marketing strategy, how to be one of the last few that are standing there. So I think there's a good market.
Are you just focusing on Chinese firms, or are you agnostic to anyone?
Oh, I'm agnostic. I think you have to kind of you need to be certainly because of certain regulations that were passed in the financial services sector here in China in the last year. It's increasing competition. It's spurring innovation. And it's increasing competition because it's easier for foreign firms to come in and establish a fund complex. You have BlackRock and Bridgewater and others that are coming in. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, said earlier this week that China is core to his strategy. Right, and this is a man that knows what he's talking about, $6 trillion in assets under management. And so certainly foreign firms are very interested in expanding their operations here, but also the domestic companies here are feeling the pressure from the foreign firms coming in, and also regulations that are allowing the banks to spin off their asset wealth management units, just creating a lot of activity here.
Okay, so if some of our viewers are early stage startups wanting to come into Shenzhen, to the Chinese Silicon Valley, what would be your top 3 tips from your experience as an auditor, as a consultant, and now working with so many startups? So what would be the top 3 tips for them to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. Coming in, one is definitely make sure that you have a good corporate governance structure in place. The different ways of incorporating a company, and things may make sense at the beginning, but as the company evolves, some of those structures may not. Certainly when you're at the very infancy, at the very beginning stage, there's a lot of activity, there's many things that you're doing, wearing a lot of different hats, but always make sure that you're looking at your risk and your corporate governance structure. You gotta really define your target market and who your customer segments are, because you can't serve everybody. You can't be everything to everybody. And so, as an example, this is one of the things that I'm telling some of the crypto exchanges that I'm advising. You can't just be the next Coinbase or OKX. Right, you have to be very specific about what you want, and that's the way that you're going to survive. Lastly,
so a differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely, you have to be the differentiator. And lastly, I would say, just keep expanding your networks, keep expanding your financial networks, your corporate networks, because you never know who you're going to come into that can give you other ideas. So for expansion.
Just on that last tip, it's China, the Chinese. I mean, we're talking about China here. China's quite open and friendly, but at the same time, the kind of degrees of separation are very few and far between. But the tightness is very strong. So yes, I may know Joe, but how well do I know Joe? So what would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think certainly that's very important in the Chinese culture, and I think that's important in any culture around the world, right? You want to establish those bonds. But I think especially in China, because it's much more of a communal society compared to other countries in the West, let's say. And because of that, so that's definitely a challenge that even I run into. And so, tips from me, because this is something that an uphill battle that I face myself, is to really take time to establish relationships. You're not going to close deals on the first or second time out. It takes time to build those relationships, to build trust, and you may have to make investments where you have to do things pro bono, let's say, right? So free, to get your name out there, get some legitimacy, and then over time you're able to build your reputation.
Absolutely. So pro bono is something that I'm looking at quite a lot. So once you build those relationships, that rapport through pro bono work, I think that lays the foundations, and that's a great tip. So you didn't mention on that networking is how well do you drink baijiu? Because baijiu is a massive part of business here.
Yes, absolutely. So
that's not baijiu.
That's not baijiu. Actually,
that's water.
This is all water that was almost empty, but now it's like half full because of the rain. So it's fresh.
I probably won't drink
Mother Nature.
Well,
it's good.
Could be worse. We're in Beijing. It could be worse. But not baijiu.
Yeah, so baijiu. So the good thing is that, due to my undergraduate days at school, one of the most important things I learned was good drinking skills and how to maintain my tolerance. And so I can still do pretty well. But, there are some times where I just, I just say can't anymore. It's too much, and then that's it. They're pretty good. They're pretty good about that, letting you off the hook. Also because I'm a foreigner, they let me off easy. Right.
Okay, so top tips are pretend to be drunk.
Exactly.
And use the foreigner card.
Use the foreigner card. Don't throw it out too early, because if not, they won't respect you. But at some point, if they see that you're able to hold your own, then that's fine.
Okay, cool. So look, the very last question, Joe, is for you personally. What's on your front? So are you going to be staying in China? Some people might see this video and say, hey, do you know, want to get in touch with Joe? And then suddenly they get in touch and you're gone. So what's the next 18 months looking like for you?
Yeah, so I'm here, so like I said, I've been coming here for a long time, and before I moved to Guangzhou last year, I actually lived and worked in Shanghai for a couple of summers, so I had a good idea of what I was coming into. This certainly wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision.
Okay.
So over the next 18 months or so, I see my time here in China as long-term. I would love to stay here 5, 10 years, even longer. Because I'm really fascinated by the culture, and I think it's just going to take me that long, if not longer, to learn the language and to also appreciate the culture. So,
absolutely. So learning a language, in my view, is learning the culture.
Absolutely.
Language
so
culture
key.
is
So key.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just to wrap up, look, Joel, it's been amazing talking to you. I mean, we've talked before. We talked about Peru. We never mentioned Peru.
Yeah, born in Peru, moved to the U.S. when I was 7. So now you guys have my complete bio. Yeah.
In terms of what you've discussed today, I mean, my key takeaways are, you know, it's super important to stay networked, some soft skills if you want to come to China. Corporate governance, I know we've been talking a lot about risk and the financial services, but you see China as, especially the Greater Bay Area, as massive. You're going to be here for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, so a lot of opportunity here, definitely.
So lots of people come back to China from the West, need soft skills, need corporate governance, etc. And Joe's around for a long time, so if you want to hit up Joe, his details are just below.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just keep those relationships that you have. I mean, the networking is so important.
Yeah.
I know you're going to be speaking about networking soon, and so
yes, yeah, you've got a workshop coming up.
And I also have a workshop on networking. But you are the LinkedIn networking master, and so mine is more old school networking. You know.
Hey, I've just taken it from a classroom onto a digital platform. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we're going to be doing some interview training and CV resume training. Some probably here in Fillmore. So watch this space, and if you're interested, hit up Joe and hit up me. And this is Wilosophy.
Fantastic. Awesome to talk to you, Will. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks,
I appreciate
guys.
it.
See you soon.
Good luck. Take care.